everybody. This is Red Panther transmitting from my sacred temple of Eris here in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. So tonight I'm going to be reading more of the 3 books of occult philosophy by Henry Cornelius Agrippa. Last time I sort of arbitrarily read 3 chapters, and they're pretty short, so today I'm going to sort of arbitrarily read for about half an hour. And I think that's just going to be a better episode length. So here we are. Chapter 4 of a threefold consideration of the elements. There are then, as we have said, 4 elements, without the perfect knowledge whereof we can effect nothing in magic. Now each of them is threefold, so that the number of 4 may make up the number of 12, and by passing by the number of 7 into the number of 10, there may be a progress to the supreme unity, upon which all virtue and wonderful operation depends. Of the first order are the pure elements, which are neither compounded nor changed, nor admit of mixture, but are incorruptible, and not of which, but through which the virtues of all natural things are brought forth into act. No man is able to declare their virtues, because they can do all things upon all things. He which is ignorant of these shall never be able to bring to pass any wonderful matter. Of the second order are elements that are compounded, changeable, and impure, yet such as may by art be reduced to their pure simplicity, whose virtue, when they are thus reduced to their simplicity, doth above all things perfect all occult and common operations of nature, and these are the foundation of the whole of natural magic. Of the third order are those elements which originally and of themselves are not elements, but are twice compounded, various, and changeable one into the other. They are the infallible medium, and therefore are called the middle nature, or soul of the middle nature. Very few there are that understand the deep mysteries thereof. In them is, by means of certain numbers, degrees, and orders, the perfection of every effect in what thing soever, whether natural, celestial, or supercelestial. They are full of wonders and mysteries, and are operative, as in magic natural, so divine, for from these, through them, proceed the bindings, loosings, and transmutations of all things, the knowing and foretelling of things to come, also the driving forth of evil, and the gaining of good spirits. Let no man, therefore, without these 3 sorts of elements, and the knowledge thereof, be confident that he is able to work anything in the occult sciences of magic and nature. But whosoever shall know how to reduce those of one order into those of another, impure into pure, compounded into simple, and shall know how to understand distinctly the nature, virtue, and power of them in number, degrees, and order, without dividing the substance, he shall easily attain to the knowledge and perfect operation of all natural things and celestial secrets. Chapter 5 of the wonderful natures of fire and earth. There are 2 things, saith Hermes, fire and earth, which are sufficient for the operation of all wonderful things. The former is active, the latter passive. Fire, as saith Dionysius, in all things and through all things, comes and goes away bright. It is in all things bright, and at the same time occult and unknown. When it is by itself, no other matter coming to it in which it should manifest its proper action, it is boundless and invisible, of itself sufficient for every action that is proper to it, movable, yielding itself after a manner to all things that come next to it, renewing, guarding nature, enlightening, not comprehended by lights that are veiled over, clear, parted, leaping back, bending upwards, quick in motion, high, always raising motions, comprehending another, not comprehended itself, not standing in need of another, secretly increasing of itself, and manifesting its greatness to things that receive it. Active, powerful, invisibly present in all things at once, it will not be affronted or opposed, but as it were in way of revenge, it will reduce on a sudden things into obedience itself, incomprehensible, impalpable, not lessened, most rich in all dispensations of itself. Fire, as saith Pliny, is the boundless and mischievous part of the nature of things, it being a question whether it destroys or produceth most things. Fire itself is one, and penetrates through all things, as say the Pythagoreans, also spread abroad in the heavens and shining, but in the infernal place strait and dark, tormenting. In the midway it partakes of both. Fire, therefore, in itself is one, but in that which receives it manifold, and in differing subjects, it is distributed in a different manner, as Cleanthes witnessed in Cicero. That fire, then, which we use is fetched out of other things. It is in stones, and it is fetched out by the stroke of the steel. It is in earth, and makes that, after digging up, to smoke. It is in water, and heats springs, and that, being tossed with winds, warm. It is in the air, and it makes it, as we oftentimes see, to burn. And all animals and living things whatsoever, and also all vegetables, are preserved by heat, and everything that lives by reason of the enclosed heat. The properties of the fire that is above are heat, making all things fruitful, and light, giving life to all things. The properties of the infernal fire are a parched heat, consuming all things, and darkness, making all things barren. The celestial and bright fire drives away spirits of darkness. Also this our fire made with wood drives away the same, inasmuch as it hath an analogy with, and is the vehiculum of that superior light, as also of him who saith, I am the light of the world, which is true fire, the Father of lights, from whom every good thing that is given comes, sending forth the lights of his fire, and communicating it first to the sun, and the rest of the celestial bodies, and by these, as by mediating instruments, conveying that light into our fire. As therefore the spirits of darkness are stronger in the dark, so good spirits, which are angels of light, are augmented, not only by that light which is divine of the sun and celestial, but also by the light of our common fire. Hence it was that the first and most wise institutors of religions and ceremonies ordained that prayers, singings, and all manner of divine worships whatsoever should not be performed without lighted candles or torches. Hence also was that significant saying of Pythagoras, do not speak of God without a light. And they commanded that, for the driving away of wicked spirits, lights and fires should be kindled by the corpses of the dead, and that they should not be removed until the expiations were after a holy manner performed, and they buried. And the great Jehovah himself in the old law commanded that all of his sacrifices should be offered with fire, and that fire should always be burning upon the altar, which custom the priests of the altar did always observe and keep amongst the Romans. Now the basis and foundation of all the elements is the earth, for that is the object, subject, and receptacle of all celestial rays and influences. In it are contained the seeds and seminal virtues of all things, and therefore it is said to be animal, vegetable, and mineral. It being made fruitful by the other elements and the heavens, brings forth all things of itself. It receives the abundance of all things, and is, as it were, the first fountain, from whence all things spring. It is the center, foundation, and mother of all things. Take as much of it as you please, separated, washed, depurated, subtilized. If you let it lie in the open air a little while, it will, being full and abounding with heavenly virtues, of itself bring forth plants, worms, and other living things, also stones and bright sparks of metals. In it are great secrets. If at any time it shall be purified by the help of fire, and reduced unto its simplicity by a convenient washing, it is the first matter of our creation, and the truest. Chapter 6. Of the wonderful natures of water, air, and winds. The other two elements, videlicet, water and air, are not less efficacious than the former, neither is nature wanting to work wonderful things in them. There is so great a necessity of water that without it no living thing can live. No herb nor plant whatsoever, without the moistening of water, can branch forth. In it is the seminary virtue of all things, especially of animals, whose seed is manifestly waterish. The seeds also of trees and plants, although they are earthy, must, notwithstanding of necessity, be rotted in water before they can be fruitful. Whether they be imbibed with the moisture of the earth, or with dew or rain, or any other water that is on purpose put to them. For Moses writes that only earth and water bring forth a living soul, but he ascribes a twofold production of things to water, viz., of things swimming in the waters, and of the things flying in the air above the earth, and that those productions that are made in and upon the earth, and are partly attributed to the very water, the same Scripture testifies, where it saith that the plants and herbs did not grow because God had not caused it to rain upon the earth. Such is the efficacy of this element of water, that spiritual regeneration cannot be done without it, as Christ himself testified to in Nicodemus. Very great also is the virtue of it in the religious worship of God, in expiations and in purifications. Yea, the necessity of it is no less than that of fire. Infinite are the benefits, and diverse are the uses thereof, as being that by virtue of which all things subsist, are generated, nourished, and increased. Thence it was that Thales of Miletus and Hesiod concluded that water was the beginning of all things, and said it was the first of all the elements and the most potent, and that because it hath mastery over all the rest. For, as Pliny saith, waters swallow up the earth, extinguish flames, ascend on high, and by stretching forth of the clouds, challenge the heaven for their own. The same falling down become the cause of all things that grow in the earth. Very many are the wonders that are done by waters, according to the writings of Pliny, Solinus, and many other historians, of the wonderful virtue whereof. Ovid also makes mention in these verses. Horned Hamon's waters at high noon are cold, hot at sunrise and setting sun. Wood put in bubbling Themis is fired, the moon then furthest from the sun retired. Ciconian streams congeal his guts to stone, that thereof drinks, and what therein is thrown. Crathus and Sybaris from the mountains rolled, colour the hair like amber or pure gold. Some fountains of a more prodigious kind not only change the body but the mind. Who hath not heard of obscene Salmacis, of the Ethiopian lake? For who of this, but only taste their wits no longer keep, or forthwith fall into a deadly sleep? Who at Clitorius' fountain thirst remove, loathe wine, and abstinent mere water love? With streams opposed to these Lyncestus flows, they reel as drunk who drink too much of those. A lake in fair Arcadia stands of old, called Phineus, suspected as twofold. Fear and forbear to drink thereof by night unwholesome, wholesome by daylight. Josephus also makes relation of the wonderful nature of a certain river betwixt Arcia and Raphania, cities of Syria, which runs with a full channel all the Sabbath day, and then on a sudden ceaseth, as if the springs were stopped. And all the 6 days you may pass over it dry shod, but again on the 7th day, no man knowing the reason of it, the waters return again in abundance as before. Wherefore the inhabitants thereabout call it the Sabbath day river, because of the 7th day, which was holy to the Jews. The Gospel also testifies of a sheep pool, into which whosoever stepped first, after the water was troubled by the angel, was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. The same virtue and efficacy, we read, was in a spring of the Ionian nymphs, which was in the territories belonging to the town of Elis, at a village called Heraclea, near the river Citharon, which whosoever stepped into, being diseased, came forth whole and cured of all his diseases. Pausanias also reports that in Lycius, a mountain of Arcadia, there was a spring called Agria, to which, as often as the dryness of the region threatened the destruction of fruits, Jupiter's priests of Lycius went, and after the offering of sacrifices, devoutly praying to the waters of the spring, holding a bough of an oak in his hand, put it down to the bottom of the hallowed spring. Then the waters being troubled, a vapour ascending from thence into the air was blown into clouds, with which being joined together, the whole heaven was overspread, which being a little after dissolved into rain, watered all the country most wholesomely. Moreover, Rufus, a physician of Ephesus, besides many other authors, wrote strange things concerning the wonders of waters, which, for aught I know, are found in no other author. It remains that I speak of the air. This is a vital spirit passing through all beings, giving life and subsistence to all things, binding, moving, and filling all things. Hence it is that the Hebrew doctors reckon it not amongst the elements, but count it as a medium or glue, joining things together, and as the resounding spirit of the world's instrument. It immediately receives into itself the influences of all celestial bodies, and then communicates them to the other elements, as also to all mixed bodies. Also it receives into itself, as if it were a divine looking-glass, the species of all things, as well natural as artificial, as also of all manner of speeches, and retains them, and carrying them with it, and entering into the bodies of men and other animals through their pores, makes an impression upon them, as well when they sleep as when they be awake, and affords matter for diverse strange dreams and divinations. Hence they say it is that a man passing by a place where a man was slain, or the carcass newly hid, is moved with fear and dread, because the air in that place being full of the dreadful species of manslaughter, doth, being breathed in, move and trouble the spirit of the man with like species, whence it is that he comes to be afraid. For everything that makes a sudden impression astonisheth nature. Whence it is that many philosophers were of opinion that air is the cause of dreams, and of many other impressions of the mind, through the prolonging of images, or similitudes, or species, which are fallen from things and speeches multiplying in the very air, until they come to the senses, and then to the fantasy and soul of him that receives them, which being freed from cares, and no way hindered, expecting to meet such kind of species, is informed by them. For the species of things, although of their own proper nature, they are carried to the senses of men, and other animals in general, may, notwithstanding, get some impression from the heaven, whilst they be in the air, by reason of which, together with the aptness and disposition of him that receives them, they may be carried to the sense of one rather than another. And hence it is possible naturally, and far from all manner of superstition, no other spirit coming between, that a man should be able in a very little time to signify his mind unto another man, abiding at a very long and unknown distance from him, although he cannot precisely give an estimate of the time when it is, yet of necessity it must be within 24 hours, and I myself know how to do it, and have often done it. The same also in time past did the abbot Tritenius both know and do. Also when certain appearances, not only spiritual but also natural, do flow forth from things, that is to say, by a certain kind of flowing forth of bodies from bodies, and do gather strength in the air, they offer and show themselves to us, as well through light as motion, as well to the sight as other senses, and sometimes work wonderful things upon us, as Plotinus proves and teacheth. And we see how by the south wind the air is condensed into thin clouds, in which, as in a looking-glass, are reflected representations at a great distance of castles, mountains, horses, and men, and other things which, when the clouds are gone, presently vanish. And Aristotle in his Meteors shows that a rainbow is conceived in a cloud of the air, as a looking-glass. And Albertus saith that the effigies of bodies may, by the strength of nature, in a moist air, be easily represented in the same manner as the representations of things are in things. And Aristotle tells of a man, to whom it happened by reason of the weakness of his sight, that the air that was near to him became, as it were, a looking-glass to him, and the optic beam did reflect back upon himself, and could not penetrate the air, so that whithersoever he went, he thought he saw his own image, with his face toward him, go before him. In like manner, by the artificialness of some certain looking-glasses, may be produced at a distance in the air, beside the looking-glasses, what images we please, which, when ignorant men see, they think they see the appearances of spirits or souls, when indeed they are nothing else but semblances kin to themselves, and without life. And it is well known, if in a dark place where there is no light but by the coming in of a beam of the sun somewhere through a little hole, a white paper or plain looking-glass be set up against the light, that there may be seen upon them whatsoever things are done without, being shined upon by the sun. And there is another sleight or trick yet more wonderful. If anyone shall take images artificially painted, or written letters, and in a clear night set them against the beams of the full moon, whose resemblances being multiplied in the air, and caught upward and reflected back together with the beams of the moon, any other man that is privy to the thing, at a long distance, sees, reads, and knows them in the very compass and circle of the moon, which art of declaring secrets is indeed very profitable for towns and cities that are besieged, being a thing which Pythagoras long since did often do, and which is not unknown to some in these days, I will not accept myself. And all these and many more, and greater than these, are grounded in the very nature of the air, and have their reasons and causes declared in mathematics and optics. And as these resemblances are reflected back to the sight, so also sometimes to the hearing, as is manifest in the echo. But there are more secret arts than these, and such whereby anyone may at a very remote distance hear and understand what another speaks or whispers softly. There are also from the airy element winds, for they are nothing else but air moved and stirred up. Of these there are four that are principal, blowing from the four corners of heaven, viz. Notus from the south, Boreas from the north, Zephyrus from the west, Eurus from the east, from which Pontanus, comprehending in these verses, saith, Cold Boreas from the top of Olympus blows, and from the bottom cloudy Notus flows. From setting Phobos fruitful Zephyrus flies, and barren Eurus from the sun's uprise. Notus is the southern wind, cloudy, moist, warm, and sickly, which Hieronymus calls the butler of the rains. Ovid describes it thus: Out flies south wind with dropping wings, who shrouds his fearful aspect in the pitchy clouds. His white hair streams, his beard big, swollen with showers. Mists bind his brows, rain from his bosom pours. But Boreas is contrary to Notus, and is the northern wind, fierce and roaring, and discussing clouds, makes the air serene, and binds water with frost. Him doth Ovid thus bring in speaking of himself: Force me befits, with this thick clouds I drive, toss the blue billows, knotty oaks uprive, congeal soft snow, and beat the earth with hail, when I my brethren in the air assail. For that's our field, we meet with such a shock, that thundering skies with our encounters rock, and cloud-struck lightnings flashes from on high, when through the crannies of earth I fly, and force her in hollow caves, I make the ghosts to tremble, and the ground to quake. And Zephyrus, which is the western wind, is most soft, blowing from the west with a pleasant gale. It is cold and moist, removing the effects of winter, bringing forth branches and flowers. To this Eurus is contrary, which is the eastern wind, and is called Apeliotes. It is waterish, cloudy, and ravenous. Of these two Ovid sings thus: To Persis and Sabia Eurus flies, whose gums perfume the blushing morn's uprise. Next to the evening, and the coast that glows, with setting Phoebus flowery Zephyrus blows. And Scythia horrid Boreas holds his reign, beneath Boyts and frozen wane. The land to this opposed doth Auster steep, with fruitful showers and clouds which ever weep. Chapter 7. Of the kinds of compounds, what relation they stand in to the elements, and what relation there is betwixt the elements themselves, and the soul, senses, and dispositions of men. Next, after the four simple elements, follows the four kinds of perfect bodies compounded of them, and they are stones, metals, plants, and animals. And although unto the generation of each of these all the elements meet together in the composition, yet every one of them follows and resembles one of the elements which is most predominant. For all stones are earthy, for they are naturally heavy, and descend, and so harden with dryness that they cannot be melted. But metals are waterish, and may be melted, which naturalists confess, and chemists find to be true. Viz. said that they are generated of a viscous water, or waterish argent vive. Plants have such an affinity with the air, that unless they be abroad in the open air, they do neither bud nor increase. So also all animals. have in their natures a most fiery force, and also spring from a celestial source. And fire is so natural to them that, being extinguished, they presently die. And again, every one of those kinds is distinguished within itself by reason of degrees of the elements. For amongst the stones they especially are called earthy, that are dark and more heavy, and those waterish which are transparent, and are compacted of water, as crystal, beryl, and pearls in the shells of fishes. And they are called airy, which swim upon the water, and are spongious as the stones of a sponge, the pumice stone, and the stone of Sophis. And they are called fiery, out of which fire is extracted, or which are resolved into fire, or which are produced of fire, as thunderbolts, firestones, and the stone asbestos. Also among metals, lead and silver are earthy, quicksilver is waterish, copper and tin are airy, and gold and iron are fiery. In plants also the roots resemble the earth, by reason of their thickness, and the leaves water because of their juice, flowers the air because of their subtlety, and the seeds the fire by reason of their multiplying spirit. Besides, they are called some hot, some cold, some moist, some dry, borrowing their names from the qualities of the elements. Among animals also some are in comparison of others earthy, and dwell in the bowels of the earth, as worms and moles, and many other small creeping vermin. Others are watery, as fishes, others airy, which cannot live out of the air. Others also are fiery, living in the fire, as salamanders and crickets, such as are of a fiery heat, as pigeons, ostriches, lions, and such the wise man calls beasts breathing fire. Besides, in animals the bones resemble the earth, flesh the air, the vital spirit the fire, and the humours the water. And these humours also partake of the elements, for yellow choler is instead of fire, blood instead of air, phlegm instead of water, and black choler or melancholy instead of earth. And lastly, in the soul itself, according to Austin, the understanding resembles fire, reason the air, imagination the water, and the senses the earth. And these senses also are divided amongst themselves by the reason of the elements. For the sight is fiery, neither can it perceive without fire and light. The hearing is airy, for a sound is made by the striking of the air. The smell and taste resemble the water, without the moisture of which there is neither smell nor taste. And lastly, the feeling is wholly earthy, and takes gross bodies for its object. The actions also and operations of man are governed by the elements. The earth signifies a slow and firm motion. The water signifies fearfulness and sluggishness, and remissness in working. Air signifies cheerfulness and an amiable disposition, but fire a fierce, quick, and angry disposition. The elements, therefore, are the first of all things, and all things are of and according to them, and they are in all things, and diffuse their virtues through all things. Chapter 8. How the elements are in the heavens, in the stars, in devils, and angels, and lastly in God himself. It is the unanimous consent of all Platonists that, as in the original and exemplary world, all things are in all, so also in this corporeal world all things are in all. So also the elements are not only in these inferior bodies, but also in the heavens, in stars, in devils, and angels, and lastly in God, the Maker, an original example of all things. Now in these inferior bodies the elements are accompanied with much gross matter, but in the heavens the elements are with their natures and virtues, viz. After a celestial and more excellent manner than in sublunary things. For the firmness of the celestial earth is there without the grossness of water, and the agility of the air without running over its bounds, the heat of fire without burning, only shining and giving life to all things by its heat. Amongst the stars also some are fiery as Mars and Sol, airy as Jupiter and Venus, watery as Saturn and Mercury, and earthy such as inhabit the eighth orb, and the moon, which, notwithstanding by many is accounted watery, Seeing as if it were earth, it attracts to itself the celestial waters, with which being imbibed, it doth by reason of its nearness to us power out and communicate to us. There are also among the signs, some fiery, some earthy, some airy, some watery. The elements rule them also in the heavens, distributing to them these four threefold considerations of every element, viz. The beginning, middle, and end. So Aries possesseth the beginning of fire, Leo the progress and increase, and Sagittarius the end. Taurus the beginning of the earth, Virgo the progress, Capricorn the end. Gemini the beginning of the air, Libra the progress, Aquarius the end. Cancer the beginning of water, Scorpius the middle, and Pisces the end. Of the mixtions, therefore, of these planets and signs, together with the elements, are all bodies made. Moreover, devils are also upon this account distinguished the one from the other, so that some are called fiery, some earthy, some airy, and some watery. Hence also those four infernal rivers, fiery Phlegethon, airy Cocytus, watery Styx, earthy Acheron. Also in the Gospel we read of hell fire, and eternal fire, into which the cursed shall be commanded to go. And in the Revelation we read of a lake of fire, and Isaiah speaks of the damned, that the Lord shall smite them with corrupt air. And in Job, they shall skip from the waters of the snow to extremity of heat. And in the same we read that the earth is dark and covered with the darkness of death and miserable darkness. Moreover, these elements are placed in the angels in heaven, and the blessed intelligences. There is in them a stability of their essence, which is an earthly virtue, and which is the steadfast seat of God. Also their mercy and piety is a watery cleansing virtue. Hence by the psalmist they are called waters, where he, speaking of the heavens, saith, Who ruleth the waters that are higher than the heavens? Also in them their subtle breath is air, and their love is shining fire. Hence they are called in Scripture the wings of the wind. And in another place the psalmist speaks of them, Who makest angels thy spirits, and thy ministers of flaming fire. Also according to orders of angels some are fiery, as seraphim, and authorities and powers, earthy as cherubim, watery as thrones and archangels, airy as dominions and principalities. Do we not also read of the original Maker of all things, that the earth shall be open and bring forth a Saviour? Is it not spoken of the same, that he shall be a fountain of living water, cleansing and regenerating? Is not the same Spirit breathing the breath of life, and the same according to Moses and Paul's testimonies, a consuming fire? That elements therefore are to be found everywhere and in all things after their manner, no man can deny. First in these inferior bodies, feculent and gross, and in celestials more pure and clear, but in supercelestials living and in all respects blessed. Elements therefore in the exemplary world are ideas of things to be produced, and intelligences are distributed powers, and heavens are virtues, and in inferior bodies gross forms. I suppose that's it for now. I hope this longer video format works out. I've definitely tried to edit them before and had to give up. I won't call myself stupid, but I have very niche interests, and editing videos isn't one of them, so I hope you guys bear with me. Well, thank you so much for listening. Please tune in next time.